Feel like you're being pulled in 1,000 directions? Let's fix that. Download your free rebalancing toolkit and learn how to design an optimized week that lets you feel like you have it all. Get the goods at brilliantbalance.net/have-it-all.
I'm Cherylanne Skolnicki, and this is Brilliant Balance, the show for working women who are ready to shine. Each week, I bring you ideas, inspiration, and insight on balance, business, and getting it all done gracefully. You ready? Let's be brilliant. Hello, and welcome back to episode 9 of the Brilliant Balance podcast. You know, we're kind of hitting our stride here, 9 episodes in. So I want to thank you for the feedback and the encouragement and the notes. You all have been amazing. It just really helps to shape the future episodes and the topics that you want to cover when I'm hearing from you. So thank you for the reviews and the Facebook comments. And it's just been really fun so far. And we're just getting started. Today is a good one. And I want to kick today off by asking you to think about a time when you really wanted to say no to something and you just couldn't find the words. You know, I think we've probably all been there, sort of trapped in the conversation, not really sure how we can get out of it without letting someone down or it being awkward. And so all of a sudden we hear ourselves saying yes when everything inside of us really wants to say no. Why do we do that? Right? What is underneath that? It's honestly somewhat of an epidemic in our world today. And I think, sadly, especially among women. And so as I started really thinking about this, it has kind of far-reaching implications. You know, an inability to say no or to learn how to say no, even early on in life, shows up in so many ways as we go forward. And I really do think it's one of the issues that's at the heart of the imbalance that a lot of us are carrying around, you know, the way we feel. So we're going to talk about it today. We're going to talk specifically about something I call the art of saying no. And I've been really excited about sharing this because I think it has so many positive outcomes when we learn how to say no with confidence and with grace. But before we get into how to do it, I actually want to spend a little bit of time talking about why we don't. Because this shows up so often that I wanted to understand what are some of the underlying causes of our inability to say no. And I have at least 3 that I want to share today with you and see if any of these are a part of your issue. You know, if you're someone who's struggling to say no, maybe only in certain aspects of your life, I want you to ask yourself if any of these causes are maybe part of what's in the way. I'm a big believer that when we understand the cause, we can find our way through, right? It leads to the action. And so sometimes you have to dig a little bit to really get to what's the belief system or what is the pattern that's underneath this repetitive behavior. So here's 3. The first place I see this show up is when we're struggling to say no, sometimes it's because we can't make a decision. We're just not sure what we want. So in essence, we delay instead of deciding. And if this is a pattern, you might hear yourself say things like, oh, not today, or not now, right? Or you hear yourself say, well, I'm not going to do that yet, but I'm going to think about it. And maybe someday I'll do it. So these show up a lot in sales conversations. You know, maybe you're looking at a purchase decision. They show up when we're trying to decide whether or not we should accept an offer. And we're at that kind of 1-yard line and we're tangled up because it feels like when we make the decision with certainty, when we say yes, right? Or we say no, that we're going to close the door. And so we just sort of leave it open. And leaving it open is a way of saying no without saying no. So think about this. If you are struggling to make a decision and you don't have a process for getting to a clear answer, you just don't make the decision at all. So the non-decision becomes the default. In fact, sometimes this gets so bad and we get so uncomfortable that we just disappear. Someone's waiting for a response from us and we just disappear. We won't call them back. We won't return the email. Now, that behavior is out of integrity. And it does not feel very good, right? It doesn't feel good, honestly, to either party, the person who is waiting for your decision, or to you when you know you're out of integrity, you're hiding, right? So the way through here is to learn to get good at making decisions. And we'll talk about that in a future episode because I think it's a big topic and really important. But in this case, I want you to really ponder how much of my inability to say no is rooted in just my inability to make a decision, period. Here's another one. The second way that I think this shows up is when we're struggling to say no, sometimes it's because we overestimate what we can do. This is kind of the, our eyes are bigger than our calendar problem. So someone approaches us with a request and we think it just won't take that long. Maybe the kindergarten teacher in our child's classroom asked us if we would cut out a bunch of felt shapes and return them to the classroom at the end of the week. And we're like, yeah, how long can that possibly take? Sure. But when we say yes to a whole bunch of those things, we forget about all the other things already on the plan. And we forget that when we add them all in, collectively, they do take a lot of time, right? So we kind of have wishful thinking about our capacity, and we just don't think anything is going to take very long, right? So this is sure, I'll bring a snack to that event. Absolutely, I will stop and run that errand. Yes, I will cut out the felt shapes. Sure, I can be on the committee, because none of them in isolation would really break the system. But when we get in the habit of saying yes, 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 and not learning how to say no or to pause and think before we accept, then we're in this pattern of overestimating what we can actually fit in, what we can do. All right. And what's usually at the root of that is not having a clear picture of what is already on the plan. So often this is, I don't have a system for managing my calendar. I don't have a system for managing my to-do lists and workloads. And because of that, I don't really know what I have to do. So it sounds like I can fit more in, right? Typically, people who are good about those systems are a little better at managing their capacity. So that's the second one, right? First one was we can't make a decision. Second one was we overestimate what we can do. The third place where I see this show up, right, when we're struggling to say no, is we're afraid of the reaction that we'll get if we say no, right? This is the classic, we don't want to disappoint anyone. Or we get worried that one of two things will happen. Either they won't like us or they won't respect us. Those two words are different. Being liked and being respected are different. And I see them playing out more so in two different arenas. So when we are in personal interactions and we're struggling to say no, we're worried that that person's not going to like us, right? That we're going to seem, well, why does she think she's too good for that? Or does she think she's too busy? Or what is so special about her that she can say no, right? That's we're worried about the judgment and what they're going to think of us. In a work environment, we're more often worried that we will lose respect or credibility. So it shows up as, if I say no to this, he or she is going to think that I'm not capable. They're going to think that I'm not committed. They're going to think that I'm not a team player. So those are really respect sentiments, not so much about being liked, but more about being respected or valued. And then, that links to things like, am I promotion worthy, or do I deserve to be on the big assignment, right? So that third one is probably the biggest, the fear of the reaction that a no will get us. So those are the cases where you might hear yourself saying, well, I can try, right? I can try to fit that in. Or maybe I can do that. Or I think I can, right? Which are really all sort of half no's. They're half no's and half yeses. But we can't bring ourselves to give a firm, clear no because of the fear of those repercussions that might come back. All right, so let me just hit those again as before we move into how to actually say no. I want to hit these 3 underlying causes of why we struggle again for you. The first one is sometimes we can't say no because we can't make a decision. We actually don't know how to make decisions well. Second reason is we overestimate what we can do, what our capacity is. And the third reason is we're afraid or terrified of the reaction that we'll get if we say no. All right, so those are the 3 things in the mix here. Now, none of those are really going to get you where you want to go. Being held back by any of those patterns is going to keep you stuck in a place that you really don't want to be. You're going to end up living out experiences that you really don't want to be in. And so what I want to teach you today is a very simple, we'll call it a script, right? A very simple script for how to say no with grace, right? Kindness and confidence. And when you learn this, when you kind of internalize how to do this, you can use it very naturally. It by no means is going to sound like a script when you get good at this, but I want you to have some touchstones of the elements of saying no that'll sort of give you something to grab onto while you're building skill here.
Feel like you're being pulled in 1,000 directions? Let's fix that. Download your free rebalancing toolkit and learn how to design an optimized week that lets you feel like you have it all. Get the goods at brilliantbalance.net/have-it-all.
Here it is, 5 steps. So you're going to put this together, and let me just say, this works whether you are doing it in writing, somewhat formally, like maybe you're responding to an email request that's come to you. It works if you're in a live interaction, like you're in a meeting with your boss or you're in a meeting, with a friend over coffee and she's asking you to do something. It works over very simple communications like text, so it really is a flexible format that should work in virtually any environment where you might find yourself needing to say no. All right, so the first thing we want to do is you want to open with gratitude. Right? You want to find something to thank the person for. And usually, you honestly don't have to dig very deeply to find this. A really simple, hey, thanks so much for your note. It was great to hear from you. Something like that works just about every time. So you want to just keep it light, open with some note of gratitude. And that really sets the tone for the interaction that's going to follow. Okay, so there's nothing confrontational about this. We don't have to make it confrontational. The second step is to just acknowledge the request. You will be amazed at how far it goes when someone just feels heard, right? When they know that you haven't been sitting there waiting to say no the whole time. You've actually heard and internalized the request. So you want to play it back in your own words so that they know that their message has landed, that they know that you have internalized what they're asking for. And honestly, this is a really important step, even if you're going to say yes, because sometimes you may have misunderstood the request. You may have made it bigger in your mind than it actually is, or smaller. I remember fairly recently, I was asked to be a part of a vision committee for an organization. And I really had to give this some deep thought before I decided if I was going to say yes or no. So I was playing back to the person making the request my understanding of what they were asking me to do. And it turned out I had really overscoped it. I'd overestimated what they were asking of me. And it gave that person the opportunity to clarify back, it's actually a little simpler than that. We only need you to do X, Y, and Z, not A, B, and C. That was awesome, right? Because that actually gave me the opportunity to say yes in a case where I was leaning toward no based on the way I had internalized the request. So really important step to just get yourself on the same page as the person who's making the ask, okay? The third step after you've acknowledged the request is this is the hard one. This is where you want to give your no. And so the way I think about this is, clarity counts. So you want to avoid words that are modifiers. You want to avoid words like maybe. You want to avoid someday. You want to avoid I'll think about it. Get the sentence out that includes the word no. The clearer and the simpler, the better. Now, if you're really stuck, here's a couple of examples. I'm afraid I have to say no. If it's formal, regrettably, I need to decline. If you're in a conversation, it might be, hey, you know what? I can't commit to that. Here's one of my favorites, especially when it's somebody who you really value who's making this ask. Maybe it's a close friend. Maybe it's a colleague that you really value. This is the sentence. While it's always hard to say this, especially to someone I respect as much as you, my answer is no. So it's unapologetic and very, very clear that you're saying no. Okay, remember, this is following a little piece about gratitude and acknowledging the request. And we'll string this all together in a minute. So after you give your no and it's clear and there's no wiggle room, you have a choice to make. You can either tell them why or not. Now that may sound radical to you, but the truth is you don't actually have to explain why, right? I think we over-explain a lot of things. We give a lot of detail that is simply unnecessary. There are times when a brief explanation that is 100% truthful can help take the sting out of the no. And you are free to give it when that makes sense. But I will warn you that when you do that, it does kind of open the door for the person to maneuver around that objection, right? So if you say, hey, I can't do it this time, but call me next time, they will come back next time. If you say, I can't do it because I have a conflict on that date, they may come back to you and say, we've been able to change the date. So if you really do not want to do it, and it is really not because of this honest, legitimate, simple excuse, in other words, if you wouldn't change your mind if they resolve that thing, then don't tell them why, right? Because it creates an opportunity, you think you're being helpful by giving them an explanation, but they may handle your explanation and now you're confronted with, you have to do it or you're out of integrity. And sometimes it's just really none of their business. You're saying no to a meeting at work because you are going to see your child in a performance at school. It doesn't matter if that's why, or if you're missing it because you have another work meeting. You've already made the choice of what your time is allocated to. So that explanation is probably not going to help you, right? You can just simply say, I'm not able to be at the meeting. And then the last piece is to close with grace. To give the person who's asking something from your reserves of kindness and to share that with them in a way that makes it clear that you saying no is not personal. So you could offer to connect them with someone else who might be able to help. By the way, I don't recommend that you just give them someone else's name because then you're putting someone else in the same situation. But sometimes you can offer to connect them behind the scenes. Hey, I know someone who might be able to help you. I'm happy to contact her. And if she has the capacity, I'll put the two of you in touch, that kind of thing. You could provide a resource that you think would be helpful, or you can simply wish them well. But the key here is you want to close with something, warm and authentic so that you end this interaction on a good note. And then here's the postscript. The next time you interact with this person, don't be weird, right? Keep it normal because you haven't done anything wrong. You haven't done anything that requires your next interaction to be awkward. You've simply said no. And saying no is a really normal part of life. We have to make it more normalized and not always feel like it is so ridden with conflict. Okay, so let's hit those 5 steps, and then I want to kind of string it all together in an example so you can hear what it sounds like. So you're going to open with gratitude, acknowledge the request, give your no, tell them why if you choose to, and then close with something, a moment of kindness. It goes something like this. Thanks so much for asking me to be a part of your event. I love what you're doing with this. It sounds like it's going to be amazing. However, I'm not able to commit to helping you. And I realize this places a burden on you to find someone else. So I would like to reach out to a great woman that I have in mind. And if she has the capacity, I'll connect the two of you directly. I can't wait to attend the event and celebrate what you've been able to pull off. That's how it might sound in an email. Here's an example of somebody who texts you and says, hey, do you want to get together for brunch this weekend? And you're torn because you've already made a commitment to your kid. And now you have this new invitation for brunch and you don't want to disappoint this person. So it might be something simple like, hey, thanks for inviting me. I love brunch. I'm not able to join you on Sunday because I've reserved the day for time with my kids, but have a great time and have a Bloody Mary for me. Simple, really simple. You are not saying, I don't like you. You are not saying, I think brunch is stupid. You're just saying, I'm otherwise committed, right? So I can't be there. We could go on all day with examples of this. We could use examples from the work environment where you're being asked to take on a project or meet a deadline that's not realistic. We could use tons of examples from our personal lives. But what we want to do with this script is we want to get over that, particularly the piece where we're afraid of the reaction that the no will get. So that's why the script matters, because we're going to help you push through your perception of this being a negative reaction and kind of keep the playing field really nice and level and keep everyone's emotions from getting engaged in this decision. So this isn't that hard, right? You can do this in person. You can do it over the phone. You can do it email, text. But, if you're somebody who's struggling with no, I think it gives you something to grab onto. I do think we'll circle back in future episodes to those other two underlying causes because there's a lot in there. Overestimating what we can do and, this inability to make decisions with clarity. I want to dig into those things separately because if we solve for those, I think it helps as well with being able to say no with more clarity and more confidence. So here's what I want you to do. When you go off into your life this week, I want you to look for someone who is making a request of you that you really know you need to say no to. And I want you to try this format. Try those 5 steps and try them on for size and see how it feels to give a no really simply with a lot of clarity and a lot of confidence. You can do it. I know you can. And I'd love to hear about your experience with this script or anything you did to make it your own after you do that. Okay. In fact, honestly, it gets easier each and every time. I promise you, the more you do this, the simpler it gets because you realize that life goes on. People will manage without your participation in every single thing. And in fact, sometimes it gives someone else a chance to do something that they really love. There is one area, though, where saying no seems to be particularly difficult, maybe the hardest audience of all of people for us to say no to. And those are those little people who live with us under our roof, our children. I think mom guilt really rears its head in that environment. So next time in the next episode, we're going to talk all about mom guilt, what drives it, and some really practical things that you can do about it. And I think you're going to find it to be very helpful as it overlaps with this idea of saying no, needing to say no to the children, and then what the emotional aftermath of that is. So look for that one next week. That's it for today. Until we connect next time, go be brilliant.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.